Hello, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Monetizing the Internet of Things, featuring Aria Systems and Avalara. I'm Scott St. John, Managing Editor of Pipeline Magazine, and I'll be the moderator of today's webinar. Joining us today is Brendan O'Brien from Aria Systems, a pioneer in cloud and subscription-based billing systems which manage recurring revenue over the lifetime of customer relationships. Also joining us today is Scott Peterson from Avalara, a leading provider of cloud-based solutions that simplify tax compliance. On today's webinar, we'll be exploring ways to capitalize on the unique revenue opportunities created by the Internet of Things. With billions of devices and trillions of dollars on the line, this is a very important subject. We're very glad to have both Aria and Avalara join us today to discuss this very important topic, and we look forward to discussing the key considerations and case studies from those that are leading the way. Just before we begin, I want to remind everyone that you can submit questions during the webinar in the Q&A window on the lower right corner of your screen. Even if you're viewing this webinar on demand, you can still submit your questions using the Q&A function, and one of our presenters will reply with an answer. We encourage you to submit any questions that you might have and that you want addressed by the presenters at the end of the session. With that, let's jump right in. The topics we'll cover today include how to monetize the Internet of Things, including looking beyond the device itself, key capabilities for the monetization of the Internet of Things, a term that Aria has coined, how to design a high-performance infrastructure, why speed matters now more than ever, and we'll also explore some key tax considerations for the Internet of Things. And finally, we'll look at several case studies from Amazon, Audi, Logitech, and others that are leading the way. Our first presenter is Brendan O'Brien, co-founder and chief evangelist of Aria Systems. Please join me in welcoming Brendan.
Scott, thanks so much. Thanks everybody for attending. Let's begin by just doing a real quick primer on what the IoT landscape looks like and what people's crystal balls are saying about the IoT these days. Just some quick numbers. Cisco, obviously a company that has put a lot of investment, continues to put a lot of investment into the IoT. They're saying that in a mere 4 years, we're talking about over 50 billion connected devices worldwide. That's something around 6 devices per man, woman, and child on Earth by 2020. That's an awful lot of devices. And correspondingly, we have analysts like IDC who in 2014 predicted that the resulting revenue from those 50 billion connected devices, the IoT world, will exceed $7 trillion. Actually, I saw an updated version of that same prediction that said by IDC about a year later, and they've now upped their forecast in excess of $8 trillion. I'm leaving it at the conservative number here just to be on the safe side, but either way, we're talking about some really, really massive numbers. What we're going to talk about today are where those numbers come from, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. They don't come from those really cool IoT devices themselves. So moving on, where do they come from? Or rather, what happens if you do sort of bet on the wrong horse here and you bet on the revenue stream that is entirely device-centric? I'm sad to say that there are a couple of very high-profile companies, I'm sure you know both of them, who came into the IoT market extremely well-positioned early on to really blaze some new trails. But unfortunately, they've been punished pretty severely by Wall Street. Look at their market cap over the last few months, and all you're seeing right there is obviously a downward trend. The reasoning behind that downward trend is because Wall Street's judgment is harsh and straightforward. It is you bank too much on the devices, people buy them and then they're done. There's going to be some point, competitively speaking or by virtue of market saturation or both, where people aren't going to be buying that many new devices all the time. Where's your revenue going to come from? When neither GoPro nor Fitbit could satisfy Wall Street with a more sort of ongoing, perpetual, annuity-based revenue stream based on those devices, they were punished pretty severely for it. So let me talk about this term. Aria has coined and in fact trademarked the term, the monetization of things. What we mean by that very specifically is the act of leveraging a connected device, an IoT device, as an access point in order to then subsequently provide recurring services that are valued by the consumer, often hopefully for which there is remuneration back to the service provider, and those services are very, very data-centric or consumption-centric in nature. So not to put too fine a point on it, but again, the monetization of things is not about the things. The things are an access point. Think of them even as a hurdle that a consumer must get across in order to then develop, to enter into a long-term relationship with a service provider in order to actually subsequently unlock the monetization of things. So we are talking about an MOT that is not about the things, but is instead about opening up recurring services for people that provide an ongoing and hopefully limitless, notice that arrow doesn't have a fixed point on its right side, revenue stream for the service provider. That is where the value is. And you don't have to take Aria's word for it. I mean, this is something that a lot of people watching this space are weighing in on. Here's one pulled quote from Forbes from about a year and a half ago saying exactly the same thing. But you can find quotes from McKinsey, Forrester, Gartner, IDC, all echoing the same sentiment, right? And like I said, that Wall Street slide I showed earlier shows the consequence of getting this wrong. Getting this right means unlocking recurring services that have monetary value to you and have real-world value to the consumers that consume them. So let's dive into a really quick, obvious example of what I'm talking about. This is the Amazon Dash. If you don't know it, it's a pretty easy tool. It's about as simple an IoT device as one can imagine. I take this little fob with a little sticky back. I stick it onto my washing machine. That fob is connected to Amazon over my Wi-Fi connection, specifically to my Amazon account. And it is keyed to order a prescribed quantity of some renewable thing which Amazon sells. Whether it's detergent for your washing machine or razor blades, what have you, it doesn't matter. When I'm running low, I hit the button, it sends an order to Amazon, and the act of even pulling up my mobile app to order something is now gone. How simple could that be? This is taking off like a rocket for Amazon, showing how IoT can deliver real value to people in a cost-effective way, showing just how easy it is to get to market with a relatively simple device. They didn't invent some grandiose new technology here. They took existing technology, existing account data that they already have, existing Wi-Fi connections that homes already have, linked them all together, one button interface, done. Now this is not a typical, what you might think of as a subscription style recurring service. I'm not signing up for a certain fixed amount of Tide detergent every month for $9.95, but it is still a recurring service. It's just an on-demand and consumption data-based recurring service. By the way, I'm not sure if any of you saw the news recently, but Amazon has doubled down on this, and they have announced the next generation of this product, Amazon Replenishment, which even goes so far as to take the human out of the reordering cycle. What they're doing is taking the same technology, embedding it directly inside of devices like HP printers, which can monitor the consumption of a resource within the device. In the case of an HP printer, they're monitoring ink consumption. And when a certain threshold is reached, the device automatically orders the replacement cartridges for the printer, or for laundry detergent for the washing machines where you pre-fill a tub of detergent, et cetera, et cetera. So they have announced this. They're establishing partnerships with various providers of these hardware devices, and you're looking at what is almost undoubtedly going to be a highly valued consumer service. So let's talk about some of the key capabilities that are required to enter into a successful approach toward the monetization of the Internet of Things. And first and foremost, let's one more time, well, I say that now, I'm probably going to circle back to it, but let's say once more that the enabling technologies, which are grayed out here, are grayed out for a reason. We want to socialize the thinking that says, great, I've got this cool thing, now let me put it aside and let me devote my company's energy into discovering the revenue streams that are behind it, and almost start to treat our own IoT-enabled devices, these enabling technologies, as commodities. Thinking that way, we believe, will help. So moving on to what we actually do want to talk about, what we do want to focus on, is first and foremost, being agile is going to be paramount in this world. IoT is not about some new technology. IoT is about the commoditization and the ubiquity and availability and shrinking in size of the technologies that we've already had for quite some time, the connectivity technologies, hardware and software, Wi-Fi, what have you. These things have all come together and become relatively cheap, very cheap, and easy to deploy. That means that I can put in kind of everything and I can get to market quickly. The bad news is, so can all of your competitors. And what this means for you is that you have to prepare for a model of business agility unlike any that we've ever seen. And that begins with making sure that you adopt modern technology stacks that are designed specifically around supporting that kind of agility. Second big thing to consider in enabling the monetization of things is the importance, the absolute paramount importance of consumption data. When I say consumption data, I'm using that as an umbrella term to cover anything that you can measure coming out of the service you provide. Location, temperature, clicks, beats, it doesn't matter. If your IoT device is an IoT device of any type, that's what it's in the job of doing anyway. It's measuring data and it's sending that data to some receiver, and then the receiving system is acting on it in some way. That data, beyond simply enabling the IoT service itself, has massive value in your overall go-to-market strategy. It has value in, it potentially can be something that you price your service offering on. We all know Netflix. Netflix is a traditional subscription model, $9.95 a month or whatever it is these days for an all-you-can-eat buffet of all of their services. It is not a consumption-based business model in terms of how it prices and packages its offering. But I guarantee you that there's a whole army of people at Netflix that are closely monitoring and aligning the actual consumption patterns of their service against the buying patterns, the adoption and buying patterns of their users. By marrying these two sets of data together, even though I haven't chosen to have that consumption data influence a line item on a Netflix user's bill, I, a product manager or product marketing manager at Netflix or an executive at Netflix, can easily look at those consumption patterns and make very meaningful billing decisions above and beyond, and pricing decisions above and beyond merely, what's my churn for the month of April. So let's do a little sidetrack and talk about one sort of big case study around data and the size of it that you need to concern yourself with in the IoT world. What you're looking at right now is a Mercedes jet engine bolted onto a Boeing 777. A Boeing 777 has 4 of these babies on board, and on a transatlantic flight from JFK to Heathrow, each single one of these engines produces around 1 terabyte of data per flight. That's 4 terabytes per flight. That's 8 terabytes of data round trip, every single day. Now, it may seem to you, and you might be partially right at least, that a lot of that data wouldn't really have much bearing on how a service might be priced. In this case, you're talking about things like wind speed and air temperature and maybe monitoring fault tolerance inside the device itself. But what we would assert is that you probably don't really know in advance what elements of that data, what types of that consumption data are going to have direct or indirect value in your go-to-market strategy. There is potential for any number of types of data to have some direct or indirect impact in how you go to market. So what we want to socialize here is to make sure that you embrace that data to the best of your ability. There are more and more platforms that are out there that can do this for you. They are getting easier and easier to deploy, less and less expensive to deploy. We encourage you to look at those platforms and start embracing the flood of data that's coming your way. And this, again, is not something that only I say. We do have a couple of quotes from some research firms, and in fact, hardware manufacturers themselves saying that the first problem to tackle in the IoT world is wrapping your arms around massive data. It can't be overstated. So let's go one more time on some of this data stuff just to make sure all the things I just said are kind of hammered home. Make sure you're asking yourself where that data lives and where it's going and how you're going to get access to it. Many enterprises have data living all over the place. Finding technology and processes and adopting them and deploying them to streamline that data and to centralize it is absolutely step number 1. Are you prepared to do that, and are you prepared to do that at massive data scale? It is going to be a massive data flood, and whatever we're seeing in terms of Data throughput these days is going to be dwarfed in the years to come very shortly. Are your security standards and are your formats data standards up to the volume challenge, right? Are they actually going to be able to scale as that volume scales? A lot of the security standards that we rely on, a lot of the data interchange formats that we rely on in general in the internet today are likely a bit heavyweight for the IoT world. There are a lot of standards organizations working on new and slimmer, leaner models around security and data interchange. We're not sure who's going to win those standards wars just yet, but I think some of the winners are coming to the fore. Make sure that you're on top of that so that you're doing this in the most efficient way and most secure way possible. So back to our key considerations, and my apologies to those on the call who are engineers. I am one of you. So what I'm about to say, I say eyes wide open. When new products roll out to market, unfortunately, one of the longest umbrellas in the tent to getting that product out to market are engineers. And that, by the way, comes from a legacy world in which systems that managed product catalogs and customers and billing were designed to be engineering focused. They were designed to be able to do whatever you wanted because at any point in time an engineer could lift the hood, reach in, tinker with some stuff, close the hood, and now you can do whatever that new cool thing you wanted to do is. But that's an engineering focused way of solving all problems. Engineers are great at solving a bunch of problems. In fact, they can solve these problems too, but it's probably not the best use of an engineer's time. In the speed and agility-focused world of the IoT, getting to market quickly is paramount, and putting engineers in the line of fire on any and all product marketing and pricing decisions is a quick route to not being agile. Speed is the new black, and if you want to achieve speed, you have to do everything in your power to get engineers, and therefore get coding, out of the critical path of getting things out to market. I like to say well in excess of 90% of product marketing and product management activities are not actually rolling out truly brand new things to the world that the world has never seen before. There's only so many times in our lifetimes when SMS texting shows up for the first time, or data on a phone shows up for the first time, or over-the-top television shows up for the first time. The vast majority, well in excess of 90% of product marketing and managing efforts are about remessaging, repackaging, repricing, and rebundling combinations of the technologies we've already adopted. So if that is what product marketing and product manager personnel are doing, doesn't it make sense to be able to give them the tools to do it themselves and to take coding and engineering out of the equation for solving that problem? Which is to say, the flip side of the no-code coin is the control configuration coin, putting configuration tools, levers, knobs, switches, dials, and even things like rules-based engines in front of business users so that those pretty everyday marketing and management product rollout tasks, like I'm going from a 2-month free trial plan after which my price point is $19.95 to a 3-month trial plan after which it's $18.95, can be done entirely by a business user. You're going to get to market a lot more quickly, and frankly, you're probably going to make the engineers in your organization happy because I'm telling you, that's not a ticket that they want to deal with in their ticket queue. They'd much rather go solve really cool, truly engineering-focused problems and leave product pricing and marketing and package offering bundling in the hands of business users to do as they please. So for those of you in the room who maybe come from that product marketing, product management background, the slide I'm showing you right now is probably going to look very familiar. This is a product lifecycle bell curve. This is something that was developed years ago by Six Sigma. It's a very simple illustration of the fact that every single product, every product of any stripe has a start point, an adoption curve, a peak period of profitability, and then a slide towards obsolescence, after which it is in fact obsolete and effectively gone from the market. Now, if you are rolling product out, you may not know, in fact, you do not know what that ultimate point of obsolescence out there is. You don't know exactly when your peak profitability will come into play or how high that curve or how long it will be, but the overall structure of this curve will be the case. There will be a peak profitability window, and eventually your product will be obsolete. If you do this right, This curve would be all blue, meaning all good stuff, all money coming into your organization. But if you go to market slow, what this version of the curve attempts to illustrate is that there are real consequences, real and unrecoverable consequences to getting to market late. Remember what I was saying before about speed is the new black. Agility is all important. The IoT connectivity capability is approaching commoditization, which means your competitors can get to market quickly. If you delay, if you get to market slow, and again, the quickest way to getting there slow is to overly involve engineers in too many of the problems you're trying to solve from a monetization standpoint, the consequence of getting to there slow, the negative consequences are twofold. One, there is an unrecoverable upfront loss of sales, illustrated by the green in this curve, that you will never get back. And the reason is because that fixed obsolescence point on the far end of the curve doesn't move. You don't know where it is, but wherever it is, it's not going anywhere. So if you get to market 6 months late, that obsolescence point is not sliding out 6 months to the right along with you. It remains fixed, and you simply lose upfront sales. Additionally, the orange part of this curve illustrates a second area of unrecoverable loss, which is depression on your average unit selling price. Your average unit price is going to erode more often than not by going to market late because there's going to be downward price pressure on you. You're going to be an also-ran. Somebody else went to market before you, set their price point for a commensurate service, for a corresponding service. You get to market late, and now you have little choice except to grab market share by lowering your average unit price. So both that green and that orange represent big chunks of money that you cannot make up on the back end, and that is the price of getting to market late. So make sure you're building out a stack that gets you to market early. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Scott Peterson of Avalara, because in addition to all of the complexities that I just talked about, he's got a whole bunch of cautionary tales to tell you about the taxation consequences in this new day and age. Scott?
Thank you very much, Brandon. So when the internet was invented, no one gave a second thought to how taxes would eventually be considered in the internet. In the beginning, the internet was the thing. There wasn't an internet of things. There was an internet, and it was the thing. And the only discussion there was of taxes is the internet taxable or is the internet not taxable? It didn't take retailers very long before they started to use the internet to create a thing, and the thing was retailing. And once they decided to do that, they started this long conversation that we've had for a very long time in this country about what is a sales tax and how does sales tax apply and why is the internet sales different than over-the-counter sale. So if you're in the sales tax world, you're trying to think of the things that you need to be able to do to collect sales tax. And it doesn't make any difference if you're making an over-the-counter sale or an internet-based sale. Do I have to collect, and for whom? Do I have a legal obligation to collect taxes somewhere, and for whom? Which local government, which state government, which national government imposes a tax that I need to be concerned about? For what do I have to collect? What is taxable where I'm making sales? What is exempt where I'm making sales? How do I know what is taxable and what is exempt? How do I know what to charge? Is the sales tax rate in Columbus, Missouri the same as it is in St. Louis, Missouri? How does any kind of a retailer know that? And how do I register, report, and remit? It's an odd thing that state governments use the sales tax as a rather overwhelming majority of the revenue that comes into states, and they make it very difficult to actually get it done. It's not just, oh, I'm selling shoes and I need to charge sales tax and that's it. No, you got to go in, you got to register, and you've got to give them all this information about yourself, and they have to give you permission to start charging sales tax, and then they tell you all the things you need to know. Well, all these things are information. In each of these little things, do I have to collect? What do I have to collect for? What rates do I charge? How do I register, report, and remit? Those are all pieces of information, and the one thing the internet is spectacular at is being able to move information back and forth. So in the beginning, and for those of you that aren't as old as I am, and I'm jealous, in the beginning, sales tax was a product. It was a service. No, excuse me. It was a product. It was software, and that's not even the beginning. In the beginning, it was a button on a cash register. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember going to a store and making a purchase, and you have this old cash register, non-electronic cash registers. Sales tax was a button on the cash register. You know, you got the clerk at the counter is pushing in buttons and charging you different things for different things, and at the end there's a button that says sales tax, and that sales tax calculates the sales tax on your total. And in some cash registers, they would do it the reverse. They'd have the sales tax would be automatically in there. Then they'd have a button where you'd push. That would be an exemption button. So if you're buying something in the string of things that you were buying that was exempt, they'd push that exemption button, and there'd be no sales tax charged on that. And well, as you all know, the cash register, the thing that Brandon was talking about, the device isn't a mechanical cash register anymore. It can be a cash register. Often it's an iPad. If you go to some retailers, it is a mobile phone, and for the overwhelming majority of online sales, it's a website. And so the machine is a cash register that now looks nothing like a cash register ever used to look like. So in the recurring economy, you go from this product, which was software that went inside a cash register somehow, some way, to a service, which is your device, whatever that device is, connected to a company who has all the information that we showed on the last slide that was necessary to be able to accurately and effectively collect sales tax. And we went from a hard-coded, device-centered world. 20 years ago, if you wanted to get sales tax automation, there were a few companies, and there were not many, but there were a few, and they had software that they had built that had all the things that we showed on that first slide. What do you charge tax for? What's the rate? Who do you charge tax for? How do you file? How do you get registered? All that was built into a big software package. And you would get an annual subscription to that. You'd pay them an X amount of money up front, and then there'd be an annual renewal of that software subscription, software license. And every month or every quarter, they would send you a magnetic disk. And you would have paid a consulting firm, a Big Four accounting firm, or maybe the software company itself, to come in and install that software in your system. So this resides in your computer system. And so somehow you had to be able to connect your computer system to your selling device. And they would install that, and then it would cost you, a small fortune to have some exceptionally talented and trained individual come in and knows how that software, that sales tax automation software works, knows how your sales software works, your accounting software works, and can configure either your accounting or sales software or the sales tax automation software so that the two of them could talk to one another. And you'd be responsible. You, the retailer, would be responsible for every time this big magnetic tape showed up in the mail for making the updates to the original system. So this tape would be an update, and in it would come, you would roll it out. If you missed it, if your mail clerk was sick the day that the magnetic tape showed up and it didn't get into the right hands, and you could go, and you went a quarter without having the update, you faced the very strong likelihood that you were not charging the right sales tax somewhere. You find your magnetic tape, your CFO calls you, screams at you, says, okay, how much liability do I have? How much do I have to put on reserve for the sales tax we didn't charge because the magnetic tape that we had but never bothered to install didn't get installed? Well, that's all changed. And that's what the Internet of Things has created. The Internet of Things now is, in the sales tax world, is all that information that I showed you on that first slide, now all cloud-based. So that what you do is you create a very simple, through APIs, create a very simple connection between your accounting software or your sales software and the sales tax provider software. Sets out in the cloud. It's always there. It's always live. It's always active. There's zero maintenance. Once you get yours set up, once the connection is created between you and the sales tax provider, there is no maintenance. That's the end of it. You don't have to, there will never be a quarterly magnetic tape that shows up at your office that you have to wonder what to do with. Consistent data and reporting. Same standards, day in, day out, transaction in, transaction out. And you need information. The information is going to be stored exactly the same way. So the same data that's necessary for every sale goes back and forth all the time, and it's always stored and it's always available. Minimize risk. I talked about your sales clerk being sick, or your mail clerk being sick the day that the magnetic tape showed up. Well, you don't have to worry about that anymore with this stuff because it's always active. It's always online. It's always ready to go. You never wonder, wow, I wonder what those people in California are doing on their sales tax. I read something, but I can't quite remember what they did. And I wrote it down somewhere, and I can't find my note. I wonder if I'm charging the right rate there. Well, that doesn't happen anymore because your sales tax provider is doing all that on a real-time basis and keeping track of all those things, and that stuff is just uploaded all the time. It's always ready to go. Gives you, the retailer, the opportunity to focus on growth, not complexity. The world of retailing can be really complicated. 320 million consumers in this country, if you count the little babies. And it's amazing how much money babies spend in this economy of ours. About 10 million retailers, lots and lots of people interacting with lots and lots of consumers, millions of products and services, new ones being created all the time, new combinations of old products and services being bundled together. You can't imagine how complicated a simple sales tax transaction becomes when you combine a piece of tangible personal property with a service, or you combine a taxable piece of tangible personal property with a taxable or an exempt piece of service. You all shop for Christmas, and you know when you're shopping for Christmas in the grocery store, they have these little pre-made packages of meats and cheeses on a cheese board with a cheese knife, and they're all wrapped in cellophane and cost you, $17.95 for the whole thing. You buying cheese? You buying a cheese knife? Are you buying a cheese cutting board? All three of those things can be taxed differently in all kinds of different states. And so when you bundle things together as a retailer, you radically increase the number of different tax possibilities that can exist. Everyone does multi-channel retailing. If you don't, somebody else has already taken your customers, so you don't have to worry about not getting into that business because you have no customers. They're gone. Trillions of individual sales transactions. The data today that is available for a retailer, for a state to evaluate is far in excess of what any state can evaluate. Even today, we're at a stage where state auditors have access to so many individual sales transactions that it is physically impossible for them to audit a normal store, a large store, because they can see every individual transactions and their computers can't handle the data. 12,000 state and local tax jurisdictions. So you take your 10 million retailers selling millions of products and services around the country times 12,000 state and local tax jurisdictions, and you end up with about 80 million tax returns a year. The level of involvement is immense. There are so many different moving pieces and parts and people in sales tax that it's a little bit mind-boggling at times. So the internet and new business models. Tangible personal property charged by usage. So This is, as I said, a software. In the beginning, sales tax automation was software that you downloaded, and if you may not know this, but in almost every state, software is tangible personal property and subject to sales tax. Today, it is a service, and it's a service in more than just the fact that you don't actually get it, but it's a service in the sense of how it's paid for. In the old days, you had a subscription, or you had a license to the software, you paid them an annual renewal, everything went fine. Today, it's a service in the sense that you pay for it only when you use it, and it's based on how much you use. In the old days, you paid them, $750,000 for the software license and $100,000 in renewal fees, whether you used it or not. Today, in the service version of this, you pay for it only when you use it. So if you need, if you're a retailer and you're making 1,000 transactions a day, well, you're going to pay for 1,000. The 1,000 will be what your fee is based on. And if you're filing 12 returns next year or next month, you're going to pay X times 12. But if the month after that you only file 5 returns, you're going to pay X times 5. If tomorrow you're going to have 5,000 transactions, you're going to pay based upon the number of transactions. So the world is radically changed from because of the way the internet has created a thing out of this sales tax information. New products and service offerings coming up all the time. Everything that's related to sales tax sales tax is being automated. Exemption certificates. It can cost you more money not to collect sales tax than it can to collect sales tax because of all the record-keeping requirements that states impose on retailers to make sure that they've truly sold an exempt thing to an exempt customer. All those things are being automated today. Direct to the end customer versus channel. There's all different kinds of ways of selling sales tax automation. We sell it directly to consumer, or directly to businesses. We sell it through our channels. The same thing with retailers. Large manufacturers have their channels, their retail stores that they sell their products to. And almost every one of them now has a website where they're also selling their own products, the stuff that their retail channel sells for them, but they're also selling it themselves. The capacity to service more locations. In the old days, when it was a magnetic tape, you had to be a relatively large business to automate your sales tax. I mean, you think about it. How large of a computer would you need to have in 1990 to be able to upload all the 12,000 sales tax rates and then the taxability for all the different products and services that you sell in all the states that have a sales tax? I mean, that's a pretty large computer, and that doesn't exist anymore. Today, no one needs a computer like that to be able to automate their sales tax because it's all run through an API over the internet, and any kind of a sales device that you have, it works real time every time. And then additional business activity to support growth. We at Avalara are constantly trying to find new ways of using the data and the information that we learn about our customers and we learn about retailing to help automate new parts of sales tax administration, or frankly any kind of tax administration. All of those things that go into making up a retailer's sales tax obligation are constantly being challenged as that retailer changes the way they do business. The beauty of the internet from a retailer's perspective is they don't have to worry about where they're located. They can be located anywhere. And their customers just show up, and they're virtual customers buying real products, real services. Well, every time you make a sale somewhere, you expose yourself to a new tax jurisdiction. So if you aren't collecting sales tax everywhere, every time you make a sale somewhere else, that state's wondering why you aren't collecting their sales tax. And it becomes a real management issue if you're a multi-channel retailer trying to know where your sales force is, where your marketing activity is, Do I have a salesperson in Wyoming today? Was I registered to collect sales tax there because the day that person shows up, I have a physical presence in that state and I have to start collecting sales tax? Do I need to worry about what kind of crazy idea some state has created about whether or not marketing creates a requirement for me to collect sales tax? So if you're a retailer and you're trying to manage your business, the last thing you want to know is, or last thing you want to do is wonder where in the world you have to collect sales tax. Well, all that goes away with modern sales tax automation, because all those things create that extra tax collection obligation. So it's not just that you have to start collecting sales tax in Wyoming because your salesperson showed up there for the first time. You also have to get registered. You also have to file a return. You have to make a payment. And you have to continue to do that for quite some time because the state's going to think you're always there. New product and service taxability requirements. Every time you as a retailer roll out a new product or roll out a new service, you combine those two products and services, or an old product and old service together, you create a new tax decision. And that tax decision is something the state's going to expect you to understand. That it's amazing how callous is not the right word, indifferent the states are to your lack of knowledge about sales tax automation. You combine two things together, they assume you know what you're talking about. And then manage ongoing change. All those things go away when you, in the modern world of sales tax automation as a service, because it's all real time. Delivered as an off-site multi-tenant solution, makes no difference how many devices you have connected to your sales or accounting software. Comprehensive compliance offering, you can go from A to Z. You know, for y'all, if you want someone to do nothing but tell you what the taxability is, you can do that. If you want something to do taxability all the way to payment, you can do that. The built-in options, the recurring billing platform. These new modern sales tax automation systems are pre-built. They come with your billing system. They come with your shopping cart. Frankly, they come with a lot of cash registers these days as well. So if you're an over-the-counter person and you got a cash register, a lot of those come with these pre-built connections. Fast time to value. In the old system where it was software that you had to get a license and had to have it installed, you could spend weeks, if not months, and I know of a case where it took a year for a company to install sales tax automation software into their sales system. That doesn't happen today. There are no requirements for you to have an IT person on staff who goes in there and creates a connection between your system and that system. These things come pre-built. So fast time to value is as much time as it takes you to create a presence on that software and put your products in there, and it's done. Ease of use, in these modern systems, the only work that's required for a business owner is if you start selling a new product, you got to go in there and tell the sales tax automation system that you're selling a new product. Once you do that, that system knows automatically where all the sales tax obligations are. And then you have to go in once a month and approve your returns. And that's it. It's done. That's the only two things you ever have to do. And it's the ease of use. You don't have to have an accountant on staff who's doing research on whether or not North Dakota taxes fudgesicles and in Minnesota taxes brown shoes. And then on-demand data accessibility. If your business grows like crazy, this stuff all scales like crazy. So you don't have to worry about whether or not, I'm making 1,000 sales today, but I know in 3 months I'm going to be making 10,000 sales a day. With the internet and the speed that goes on to these things, these things happen automatically. So why does multi-tenancy matter? All customers get automatically updated tax content changes. California decides they're going to start exempting brown shoes but taxing blue shoes, gets in there automatically. Everybody selling shoes into California, their system is absolutely accurate. All customers automatically get updated software changes. Everybody does software changes. Everybody does new and enhanced things. These things come automatic, and because it's all API driven, there's nothing to download. This stuff never resides on your system. It's always out there in the cloud, and you're just connecting to something that's always updated and always accurate. And you get to spend all your time as a retailer focusing on growth. You don't have to worry about taxes. The taxes are taken care of. So Brandon, take it over again, please.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, let's quickly review just some case studies as we wrap up here of companies that are actually using platforms like Aria and Avalara to solve these kinds of problems and monetize the IoT successfully. One of my favorites that I love to talk about is Philips Medical. I mean, it may not seem obvious. In fact, I think that's a common theme among many successful IoT business strategies, monetization strategies. They're not obvious. Philips Medical makes big iron scanner equipment. They're one of a small number of manufacturers of this kind of equipment in the world, and they realized that they'd tapped their market. Every large regional medical center that had a capital budget that could afford to buy one of these things has bought it, and with good maintenance, they last a long time. So they asked themselves, are we able to find a new addressable market? And if so, how do we do that? And what they did was they embedded some pretty simple IoT style technology into their existing machines. They offered those machines at a very, very low entry price point and sort of a lease model to small medical centers rather than the big city hospitals. Now small city regional medical centers can get their hands on these things. They weren't able to afford it before, and they can pay for them on a pay per scan basis. And that's by linking the consumption data that flows out of these machines, which is pretty significant, and finding, using next generation software like Aria to put rating value on it and produce a bill every single month to those small hospitals. Brand new market. Audi basically uncovered a new business model where they're doing basically luxury on-demand zip cars for Audi lovers. I have a web app. I say I want to have a convertible show up at this location. It's valeted to me, or I walk to a lot and unlock it using my phone as a key fob, drive the car, charged on either a subscription basis or on a per mile basis, or maybe even on a gasoline consumption basis. All of those things are possible, and Audi is one of a lot of car companies, OEMs, that are pursuing all sorts of cool IoT-based connected car strategies and unlocking a whole bunch of new revenue streams. This is one of the first entrants into the market. You're going to see an awful lot of them very, very quickly here. Additionally, I love to talk about Ingersoll Rand, makers of Schlage locks, regular old everyday humdrum locks, right? People don't buy new locks with great frequency, and if they're well made, well, they buy them with even less frequency. So the makers of Schlage locks, under their parent company Ingersoll Rand, decided to put some IoT connectivity into those locks and to offer mobile phone app and web-based control and access to those locks. Unlock the door because your husband got home and forgot his key, and wife pulls up her app and hits a button, and boom, the door's unlocked. Likewise, if the door is left unlocked by the babysitter, you get an alert. Really cool stuff. Lots of entrants into this market as well. They've actually re-released this product under the brand name Nexia, N-E-X-I-A, favorite one of our customers as well. And then, of course, there's Netgear. We all know Netgear, but again, Netgear learned the lesson that, unfortunately, I would say GoPro didn't learn when we were talking about that on one of the earliest slides here. Netgear recognized right away that they needed to actually fold a recurring service revenue model behind their enabling IoT-based device, and they've done that with great success with the Arlo camera. So let's just wrap up really quick and cover on a couple of slides here. Number one, the truths of what monetization, successful monetization of the IoT are, the big highlights here. One, for the IoT, for the Internet of Things itself, it's not a science experiment anymore. It's not a hypothetical. It is here. There are plenty of examples. The landscape is changing daily. If it's not part of your daily life, it is very likely to become part of your daily life. So let's treat it accordingly. Secondly, monetization of the IoT, success there is based on the services that the devices unlock and not the devices themselves. Bank too much on the profitability of the devices, and you go the way of GoPro and Fitbit, and by the way, I hope they recover, but they have some recovering to do. do it well, and you will be heavily rewarded by Wall Street investors and customers. Consumption data is what makes the IoT the IoT. It's what makes those services deliverable. It's what makes the services services. However, don't forget that that consumption data for the MOT has massive importance on a micro and a macro scale. I need it to be able to do good customer service and maintain high customer satisfaction, so I make that customer retention line last as long as possible. I need it for the flexibility of being able to offer consumption-based pricing to the market if and when the market demands it. And by the way, if you are being told by your line of business owner, oh, no, simple subscription's all we're ever going to do in our IoT strategy, don't worry about that consumption data, I would advise you to not believe them. And if you're telling that to yourself, I'd advise you to not believe yourself, frankly, because you just don't know. You just don't know what your market's going to demand. And the last thing you want to do is build a new technology stack around IoT just to have to do it a couple of years later because you ignored that consumption data. And then, again, it's very important from a differentiation standpoint. Speed is the new black. If you want to be agile, you need to be able to react to consumption trends. Whether it influences pricing or it doesn't, you need to have the capabilities of doing that up front. And then as far as some of the takeaway actions that I really hope you listeners will take with you as you embark on your IoT journey, make sure, again, you're focusing on services more than the devices. For all intents and purposes, start to get the device out of your mind. Think solely about the service or the ability that you can. Second, put a lot of emphasis on getting that data management, collection, security, storage, and rationalization house in order, and avoid data avoidance strategies. In fact, embrace your data. Find technologies that will gracefully scale with you and ingest anything that you can measure, because that's going to be of paramount value to you long term. And then, of course, make sure that you're doing this with systems that can not only consume that data, but can react to it, analyze it, and create targeted offerings, because that's going to be key in making sure you remain agile and speedy in this most agile of markets that's on its way. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Scott St. John. Thanks, all of you.
Hi, thanks, Brendan. Thanks a lot. And thanks to Scott for sharing your insights on how to capitalize on the Internet of Things and around key considerations around monetizing the Internet of Things, such as developing recurring revenue streams beyond the device itself, accelerating speed to market, and important tax implications. We received some great questions from the audience, and I encourage everyone to keep sending them in by submitting them through the Q&A panel on the lower right-hand side of your screen. And with that, let's take our first question. The first question looks like it's for you, Brendan. A lot of people talk about what we can and should do, but I want to know more about the roadblocks and pitfalls. What is the single most thing we should avoid if we're looking to cash in on IoT?
Well, I think going all the way back to the very early part of the presentation, regarding an IoT device itself, generally speaking, as the profit center is the roadblock. That is the pitfall. If you think about some of the use cases that I put forward around Philips Medical or around Audi, what they did not do was center their profit-seeking agenda around the devices that they built. What they realized was that by offering the devices at a very low to free entry price point, they are instead unlocking the value of the underlying service. I mean, and then we all have versions of this in our everyday life, whether they are directly IoT related or not. How many apps are on the App Store, which obviously cost, not insignificant amounts of money to develop, which you can download and use for free. And the reason, by and large, that those apps are offered for free is because behind the scenes, secondary to that free downloaded installation of the app, there's some underlying service that produces an annuity-style version of a revenue stream. And again, if you think back to my second or third slide, if you look at GoPro and you look at Fitbit, those are companies that should act as cautionary tales. They put all of their emphasis on finding profit around the device itself, recognized far too late that the way to get a real profitability model in place was an ongoing underlying service, and they were punished by Wall Street for it. That is absolutely the #1 roadblock.
Great answer, Brendan. It actually brings up another one for me. And do you think that's a reality? Do you think that device manufacturers or service providers can give devices away for free, or they're missing out on a huge revenue opportunity by doing that?
Look, it depends on the device, right? There are devices and there are devices. There are devices where the manufacturing cost is $8.43 and giving it away for free to unlock a recurring service is a fairly trivial exercise. And there are devices that cost many, many tens of thousands of dollars to produce. Whether it's free or reducing the cost of the device in order to lower the barrier of entry as far as possible, that's the exercise. It's really a psychological exercise at the end of the day. It's about removing institutional thinking around the device itself as profit center, whether that means free, reduced cost, at cost, whatever it happens to be. Your business is going to dictate what's tolerable. My simple suggestion is go for whatever the maximum level of tolerance toward lowest possible price point that you can possibly stomach.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. It's interesting to contrast that against what we're seeing in the marketplace with device charges increasing in some areas, but you're right, it's about changing the psychology, about looking at the device as a profit center as opposed to the only source of revenue going forward in an IoT environment. Next question I have is actually for Scott, and this is actually regarding the tax law section of the presentation today. Do you ever think tax law will become simpler as we move away from traditional commerce?
No, I don't. I think actually it's going to become more complicated. States and state sales tax law was built upon the concept of a single person owning a single store in a single jurisdiction. And you'd be amazed at how many statutes you can go out there and look at today that were written in 1932, 1934, 1935, and they're still working. And they're still using them. They don't work as well as they could, but they're still using them. New versus traditional forms of commerce is only going to make things more complicated. People are building more things, creating more things, bundling more things together, emerging software with services with tangible personal property. No, life's going to get more complicated.
Yeah, and I think there was some chat going on about the complexity of IoT and the tax code not keeping up with innovation, which is a key issue. So I think you're right there. I think the complexity will only grow as we move forward. The next question it's an interesting one. Brendan, I'm going to direct this one to you. If your business doesn't easily mold into a consumption-based service or offering, how do you suggest they approach the IoT so they're not missing out?
Well, first of all, I would say that, first and foremost, don't presume that your business doesn't fit a consumption-based offering. There have been plenty of businesses that don't apparently fit a consumption-based go-to-market structure that end up actually profiting from one. So you just don't know in advance. But I understand the question. A lot of businesses on their surface don't at least appear to potentially derive value from a consumption-based offering. That said, consumption data, number one, is at your fingertips almost by definition of the IoT itself. The IoT is about the transmission of data from remote devices to some centralized service where some decision-making process or secondary value is then derived. You're already, if you're in the IoT business, in the business of collecting data, even if it's today only in service of delivering your core service. It isn't, generally speaking, a massive technical lift to then, additionally, redirect that data into your quote-unquote billing system or customer care system. So even if you have no intention up front of going to market with a consumption-based offering, that data, if redirected into your billing/customer care system, has massive value for individual customer care. Somebody calls and says, hey, I want a refund of the service because I didn't use it last month. It would be nice if the customer service rep can hit a button and say, well, yes, you did, or no, you didn't, right? So it has value at the micro level. It also has value at the macro level because, again, using the example I offered earlier about a product manager looking at a churn rate on a standard monthly freemium style plan, you can make much more actionable decisions if you are able to compare adoption rate, churn rate, retention rate, transaction amounts against that consumption data. Knowing whether or not people value my service is based first and foremost on how much and how they use it. So it has very critical product management actionability if you allow it to be present and viewable to your product manager. And then at the end of the day, you're at least not closing the door. You're future-proofing yourself for a market that's going to change in ways that you simply cannot foresee in advance. You just don't know today whether or not your market will demand a consumption-based service. If it turns out that they do, it should be, if it's already present in your billing/customer care system, a product manager can make that decision, hit a button, and you're already loading and measuring the stuff that you're subsequently potentially going to be billing on.
Embrace your data, right?
Embrace your data, absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Brendan. And thanks to all of our presenters, Aria and Avalara, and to all of you for attending today's webinar. We've gotten a lot of great questions here in the background, which we have logged, and we will be reaching out the relevant presenters to answer your questions after today's session. Also, any on-demand questions that we receive, we'll be reaching out to answer those questions as well. Thanks again, and everyone have a great day.